In today's video, we are going to talk about one of the most important men in the history of Christianity. That man is Martin Luther. Martin Luther was a monk and theologian, born in Eisleben, Germany, on November 10, 1483, and died on February 18, 1546, in the same city. He was responsible for starting the Protestant Reformation movement in the 16th century. Luther was critical of the power of the Catholic Church and the misguided behavior of the clergy. Besides him, other theologians like Thomas Müntzer, John Calvin or Philip Melanchthon, and politicians like King Henry VIII criticized the actions of the Church. Martin Luther's ideas spread to several territories of the Holy Germanic Empire, Holland, the Scandinavian countries, Switzerland, the United Kingdom and part of France. In 1525, he married the former nun Katharina von Bora, with whom he had 6 children, only one of whom reached adulthood. Son of the peasants Hans Luther and Margaret Ziegler, Martin Luther, German for Martin Luther, received a strict education centered on the Catholic precepts. Since his father wanted him to be a lawyer, he entered the University of Erfurt to study law. Although he was a man of faith, his vocation to the religious life came by chance. One day in 1505, on his way back from his parents' home, a big storm caught him in the middle of the road and Luther was almost struck by lightning. In fear, he made a promise that he would become a monk if he survived the storm. Thus, he entered the monastery of St. Augustine, Indiana, Erfurt in 1507. There he would continue his studies, enrolling at the University of Wittenberg to study theology. After graduating, he would teach at the same university. At that time, many Catholic thinkers were discussing the need to reform the Church and the clergy, and Luther was not indifferent to these debates. For this reason, in one of the discussions promoted by the college, Luther summons his students to debate 95 theses of his own. In this document, he criticized the excessive wealth of the Church, the lack of preparation of the clergy, and the indiscriminate sale of indulgences. These 95 theses were nailed to the door of the Church of All Saints in Wittenberg on October 31, 1517. This event was considered the foundation of the Protestant movement. However, it must be made clear that in doing so, Luther was only fulfilling one of the requirements for academic debate. Under no circumstances did the German theologian already intend to found a new church. The debates in Wittenberg continue and Luther consolidates his doctrine by summarizing it in the principle of salvation by faith. He argued that the believer could do without the Church to achieve salvation. In 1520, Pope Leo X issued a bull condemning most of the statements in the 95 Theses. Upon receiving the document, Luther burned it in public, aggravating the situation. At the same time, some of the German nobility began to appreciate Luther's ideas. After all, many princes saw an opportunity to take over the Church's lands and no longer have to pay taxes to the clergy or fight in wars called by the Pope. 1 year after Pope Leo X's attitude, Emperor Charles V convened an assembly of the princes of the Holy Roman Empire, called the Imperial Diet, held in the city of Worms. Luther was invited to recant, but he refused and was thus considered a heretic. So, after the Diet of Worms, Luther took refuge in the castle of Wartburg, where he began the translation of the Bible. Religious wars between Catholic and Protestant principalities followed, which would only be ended in 1555 by the Peace of Augsburg. This agreement determined that each ruler within the Holy Empire could choose his religion and that of his subjects. How did Luther die? Many people believe that Luther was murdered because of the persecutions. In fact, with the Edict of Worms in 1521, the theologian had been declared outside the law and anyone could kill him without suffering consequences. Luther, however, died many years later, and although there is no consensus as to what the cause was, he ended his days at home and attended by doctors. He died in his hometown on February 18, 1546, at the age of 63, victim of a stroke or pulmonary angina. What is Lutheranism? Martin Luther's doctrine became known as Lutheranism. Although he rejected the name, his followers came to be identified as Lutherans, but Luther himself preferred the term evangelical. The central idea of this religious doctrine is justification by faith. For Luther, God will not save human beings by their actions, but by their faith in Jesus Christ. Thus, the relationship between believers and God is direct, without the mediation of the Church, which would only be in charge of teaching and guiding believers. As a consequence, Luther only admits the Bible as the source for faith and rejects the oral tradition used by Catholics. In 1580, however, Lutherans defined other writings that could be used to deepen belief, such as the Nicene Creed and the Augsburg Confession. Luther also proposed simplifying the liturgy. Lutheran churches have few ornaments and hymns are made from easy melodies for the whole assembly to follow. Luther himself, who played the lute, composed several religious hymns. Luther recognized only two sacraments, baptism and the supper. As for the clergy, he instituted that the minister of the word would be responsible for the instruction of the congregation, but without being above the community. Lutheran pastors could marry and start a family. Lutheran churches do not have a worldwide leadership and are organized nationally and locally. However, several Lutheran denominations congregate around the Lutheran World Federation and the International Lutheran Council. If you like this video, leave your like, share it with more friends and help us share the Word of God.